Before we get into the assembly of this video, we are going to talk about this unit's dangers and the safe operation of this unit. The buyer assumes all liability and responsibility for the safe operation of this unit. Do not attempt to operate this unit without this bottom safety cage installed. Before use, ensure that it is installed properly. Do not attempt to operate this unit without this head belt safety shield installed. Serious injury or death can occur. Because of the height of these units, they are very top heavy and can tip over easily. Do not attempt to move it around with it being raised to its highest point. Do not attempt to move this unit around your facility without it being lowered to its lowest point. Before moving the unit around your facility, back it away from the bin that you are discharging into and lower it to its lowest point. This unit is only to be used on a flat or level surface. When operating this unit, be safe and keep your hands, fingers, and feet away from the intake of this unit and discharge of this unit or any moving component on this auger. Failure to operate this auger properly or follow these safety instructions can result in serious injury or death. Here we can see all of the parts that you will be getting with your Javelin 16-4 auger. We have our frame here. This is what holds up the unit. We have our two wheels, our smaller ancillary components, motor mount, discharge spout, safety cage that goes on the auger intake, two bags of hardware, drive pulleys and a belt, safety shield for the outside of the auger, a 3/4 horsepower 3-phase motor or a 3/4 horsepower single-phase motor if your unit doesn't come with the speed controller. The speed controller mount, speed controller, winch, splice right here. This is what joins the two auger tubes when everything is assembled. Should have an auger screw as well and two wheels. What we need to do first to get started with the assembly of the Javelin 16-4 is join the two auger tubes. That is the head piece, the tail piece, the splice, and then the screw right here. This is the first bag of hardware. This has a lot of the bolts that you'll need to assemble the auger. Okay. Now we're going to join the screw to the input shaft of the head. And when we join this, we want to make sure that our flighting matches up with this flighting here on the opposing screw. It's always a good idea to lubricate things that you're trying to put together. Just makes things go a lot smoother and a lot easier. I'm using Never Seas as well. If this auger was ever going to be taken apart, this will make that process much easier. Like I said earlier, when we put these two pieces together, we have to make sure that this part of the auger screw is going to match up with this part so it moves grain properly. And you should just slide on there pretty easy. There we go. And we just rotate it till that hole lines up. Now we are going to use an 1.5 inch in length by 1/4 inch in diameter bolt. Slides through there like that. There we go. And then we want to make sure that we put one of the 1/4 inch by 20 thread nylon lock nuts on here. This will ensure that this does not vibrate loose over time. Remember, it has to be a nylon lock nut on this part. We do not want this to come loose in operation. A nylon lock nut has this nylon donut in the top. That ensures against vibration and it will not loosen up. We thread that on here like this. And then to tighten it down, we use a 7/16 socket on a ratchet and a 7/16 open-end wrench. And then when we tighten this down, we don't want to over tighten it and twist the bolt off. where we want it to be snug. And there we go. Okay, we're now going to slide the bottom tube onto the screw. Now when we slide the bottom tube onto the screw, we want to be very careful not to pull up on the tube and put a bend in the auger screw right where it joins together. This will cause a lot of vibration and slapping in the auger screw when the auger runs. Now we are going to attach the tube splice to the auger tube. This is what joins the two tubes and makes them rigid. Pick it up like this. And we want to make sure that we put the cut point of the tubes in the exact middle of the splicing sleeve. This will make sure that it has as much tube as possible on each end inside of the splicing sleeve. This will give it strength and make it rigid. We want to make sure that we have this level as well, so when we tighten it down it's not on there at an angle. Then we take the 1.5" by 5/16 in diameter bolts and the 5/16 standard thread nylon lock nuts. There are 8 bolts to this part of the assembly and 8 nylon lock nuts. Remember, a nylon lock nut has that nylon donut at the top of it. This ensures that it will not loosen up as the machine is used and vibrations go through it. Okay, now that we have all of the nuts on, we want to make sure that our two auger tubes are still butted up against each other, nice and tight, so there's no leaking while the unit is running. Then we take an impact with a 1/2" deep well socket and a 1/2" open end wrench, and we tighten down the bolts. And there we have it. Everything is nice and tight. The auger is very rigid and strong. Everything is tightened down and is ready to stay in place for a long time. Okay, with the auger tubes connected and everything tightened down thoroughly, we need some tables or sawhorses at each end of the auger tube. A stack of pallets will also work. Now we are going to put the wheels on. The wheeled frame or bogy, this is what supports the auger and makes it easy to roll around. Before we put one wheel on, we put a flat washer on. These are included in the hardware bag. We put that on, butt it up against the end of the bolt here. And we take one of our wheels and slide it onto the bolt. Then we put a flat washer on the outside of that. And then we put our nut on. This is a nylon lock nut as well. This allows you to tighten the nut down, but not cinch it down so hard that you will destroy the small bearings in the wheel here. The wrench that is used to tighten down the nut that holds the wheel on is a 15/16. Now when we tighten these down, we do not want to over tighten them. It is crucial that you do not over tighten them. We just want them to be lightly snug. That's too much. See, the wheel doesn't turn freely, so we need to back it off a little bit. Quarter turn. Okay, we've got it now. There isn't any side to side movement, but it is still loose and free enough for the auger wheel to turn freely on the axle. That right there is perfect. Remember, it is essential that you do not over tighten this nut and damage the wheel bearing. First, the large flat washer goes on, then the wheel, then the other flat washer, and and then the nylon lock nut. Okay, now you can see that it's not tightened down enough. There is a little side play, so we need to tighten that down just a little bit more. And that there is perfect. Okay, with the wheels installed on the frame or bogy, we can now position it up under the auger. Now you can see this end right here. This is what slides up and down on the bottom of the tube. This end right here to go up towards the discharge end of the auger. Okay, now what we need to do is remove these U-bolts here. These are reinstalled after the bogy is up against the bottom of the auger tube. Alright, now we are going to attach the front of the wheeled frame or bogy to the auger tube. This is the part that slides up and down. Now again, these U-bolts right here should not grip the auger tube tightly. They are just there to keep the auger tube from hopping up and out of the cradle. So what we want to do is now put these nuts back on here. Now if you'll notice, these have these two nuts right here on the bottom of the threaded part. That is the stop for it to push against. That allows these U-bolts to be tightened down but still fit loosely around the auger tube. Then we take our wrench and tighten them down. Alright. And then this should fit nice and loose around the auger tube with 3/16 to an 1/8 inch of play. This will allow this to move up and down on the auger tube. And with all of that installed, the sliding bogy should look like this. Again, making sure that it has up and down play and it fits loosely onto the tube. It should not be tightened down tight onto the tube. Okay, now we're going to install the back part of the auger. This is the part that is fixed in place and tightened down. What we want to do is go ahead and remove these U-bolts. Okay, this is where you need someone to help you. We need to raise the tube up so we can get the back clamp positioned properly. After we install the motor and get all of the weighted components put on, we will adjust this further to get the unit balanced out. But right now, we just need someone to hold up the tube while we install the U-bolts. Okay, now we take an impact with a 9/16 socket on it and tighten them down. And that should do it. Okay, with the clamps tightened down, we are going to install the cable winch here. This is what draws the two pieces together and raises the auger. It is held in place by two 1 inch in length, 3/8 diameter standard thread bolts, 2 lock washers, and 2 3/8 nuts. Remove the cable winch from the box. It should set on the machine just like this. Then we put one bolt in behind the unit into the slot there. Then we take the second bolt and put it in to the other bolt hole here. Then on the bottom, we put a lock washer on and then a nut. This ensures that it won't come loose while the unit is in use. Then we tighten those down. When the cable winch is installed, it should look like this. You can see the back side of the unit, you can see the lock washer that we installed and then the nut. Do not forget to tighten these down. Alright, we've attached the cable winch to the frame. We switched the clutch to the out position. This will allow the cable to be pulled out. And then we hook it right here into this loop. Now the cable winch is installed. And then to pull the cable back in, we flip the clutch to the ratchet position. Then we can take up the cable. Okay, what we're going to do now is install the safety cage on the intake of the auger. This is a crucial component. Do not operate this machine without this safety guard in place. What comes with your auger should look like this. To attach the safety cage to the bottom of the auger, you will need 4 1.5 inch in length by 5/16 in diameter bolts and 4 nylon lock nuts. These are 5/16 nylon lock nuts. Alright, now this is the intake end of the auger, and before we go any further with the assembly, we want to have this safety cage on. This will keep the auger screw getting bent. It just goes on like this. This goes onto the bottom, slides onto the shaft like that. Then this piece right here goes over the top. Then you take the 1.5 inch by 5/16 in diameter bolts, put them in from the top down, and put the 5/16 nylon lock nuts onto the shank of the bolt, making sure that nothing gets cross-threaded. Okay, what we're going to do now is tighten all of the bolts to ensure that this doesn't move. We want to make sure that this gets cinched down because this gets hit a lot on the ground and we do not want this to move. It could cause auger screw damage. So we're going to line this up as best we can, make it level on the tube. Then we're going to start tightening these down. We use a 1/2 inch open end wrench and a 1/2 inch deep well socket on an impact. And there we have it. Alright, now we're ready to install the bearing. This is what holds up the bottom end of the screw. But before we do that, we want to clean the shaft and make sure it has no burrs or gouges. This will allow the bearing to slide on very easily. When you are installing a bearing onto a shaft, you should never have to beat it on with a hammer. If you have your shaft properly cleaned, it should just slide on. Okay, in order to slide the bearing onto the shaft here, we're going to prep it. What I'm using is some emery cloth. Sandpaper works just as well. And if there are any large burrs, I have a file here. Just go over the shaft like this. Okay, now we're going to put the 3/4 inch bearing into the first fastener housing. We're going to put the top piece on. With that properly put together, it should look like this. Then we're going to take the larger housing and put that over top of it and go over and install this onto the bottom of the auger. Alright, we've got our bearing here. Now when you install this, you can see that it has this shoulder that is for the lock collar here. Once this is slid onto the shaft, this is tightened down around there. In a minute we'll demonstrate that. So now we've got our bearing inside of the first and smaller fastener bearing housing. Take it up here, slide it onto the shaft. And as I said before, if the shaft is properly prepped, the bearing should slide easily onto the shaft. The bearing slides easily down onto the shaft. You should never have to beat it into place. Then we take one of our 1 inch long 5/16 in diameter bolts. We put one flat washer over the end of it like this. Then we take it and put it in to this bottom hole right here. Then we take one of our 1/4 inch flat washers. We use 1/4 inch flat washers on this because they have a tighter tolerance around the shank of the bolt. Then we take one of our 5/16 lock washers put them onto the bolt, and then we put our nut on over top of everything. And we don't want to tighten these up yet because we have to install the last two. Now we've got everything put on properly. Your unit should look like this if it's put together right. Now I can demonstrate how we can move this from side to side and up and down if needed to get the correct amount of spacing between the bottom of the safety shield here and the bottom of the screw. We want the screw to ride a little higher and not touch the bottom of the safety shield. With everything in the correct position, we found it's best to have this smaller bearing housing centered inside of the larger circle on the larger bearing housing. Now that we have everything properly aligned, we're going to tighten everything down. This is done by an impact with a 1/2 inch socket on it. We want to make sure that these are snug, so there's no chance of it coming loose and moving while in use. Now we take our lock collar. These slide over the end of the shaft and are rotated clockwise until it is tight. Lock collars typically have 2 points on them here. The first point is a threaded opening for the set screw to go into. This is tightened down after the lock collar has been tapped around with a hammer and a punch. Okay, what we're going to use to tighten the lock collar down onto the shaft is a hammer and a punch. We put the punch inside of the unthreaded hole. This is the hole on the side of the lock collar that does not have any threads in it. Do not get these two mixed up. We take our punch, stick it into that hole there, and give it a few light taps with our hammer. Now that that is locked down, we take our 1/8 inch standard Allen wrench, we put it into the top of the set screw and tighten it down. Want to make sure that we get that nice and tight. Now the safety cage and carrier bearing is properly installed. Now we are going to install the U-bolt stop. This goes on to the tube right about here and keeps the bogy from coming up too far. This is a crucial component and must be installed for the auger to work right. Just remove the bolts off of the bottom here. Don't lose these. We'll need them in a second. U-bolt goes over top of the tube. Clamp goes up against the bottom. Now taking a tape measure so we know that the stop right here that keeps this from running into the discharge is at the right place. We take a tape measure and measure from the edge of the clamp to the front of the mounting plate, which is 10.5 inches. So from this edge of the clamp bolt here to this edge of the motor mount should be 10.5 inches. We want to make sure that this gets tightened down so nothing moves over time. This part right here is going to take a lot of abuse, so we want it to be firmly in place. Okay, with the stop in place here, firmly secured down, we're going to install the discharge spout here. It has these two straps right here that go on the top of it, as well as 4.5 inches in length, 5/16 in diameter standard thread bolts with 4 nuts and 4 lock washers. Just goes up under the unit like this. We want to make sure that we are getting the discharge spout in line with the discharge of the auger tube. We don't want it to be too far forward. That will cause grain to leak out. We want it to be right about there. With that in place, we can put our straps on. They just slide up and through here. We can move that back just a little bit. Okay, then we put our bolts in. Sliding them down in from the top. Lock washer goes on the bottom, and then a nut. Okay, with all of the hardware installed, we can now tighten everything down. Okay, now we are going to install the 3/4 horsepower electric motor onto the motor mount. If your unit does not come with a variable speed controller, this will be a single-phase motor, but our variable speed controllers work with 3-phase motors. The two parts you'll need are the motor and the motor mount itself. The motor mount looks like this. To put the motor mount on, we flip the motor upside down, and then we install the motor mount. The bolt here that comes out, this is what holds the safety shield on, should be on the same side as the motor shaft. Then we take the 5/16 in diameter by 1 inch length bolts here. There are 4 of these. Slide them into the back through the slots here. You can see the bolts going through the motor mount here, and then they're going through the motor base of the motor. We're going to put a flat washer on these, and lock washers, and then nuts. Then we take our 5/16 flat washers here, slide them down over the shanks of the bolts. Then we take our 5/16 lock washers here, put them on top of that. Then we take 4 of the 5/16 nuts here and put them onto the bolts. Now, with the motor attached to the motor mount here, you can see the bolts and how the hardware should look. The bolt comes up through the motor mount, up through the motor base. A flat washer is installed, then a lock washer, and then a nut. Now, before we can install the motor onto the auger here, we have to put our belt tensioning bolt in. This is a 3-inch in length by 1/2 inch in diameter bolt. This is the jam nut that is tightened down once the belt tension is adjusted. So we're going to put that on there, and we're going to put this into the hole here up at the top. We take the motor with it being attached to the motor mount, set it down onto the head like so, and we take this kingpin here and slide it through these 2 holes here. With the kingpin in place, we take this flat washer here. This is included in the second bag of hardware. Slide that over the pin. Then we take this cotter pin here and slide that down and through the hole on the kingpin here. Then with a pair of pliers, we grab the long part of the cotter pin and bend it over to make sure that it will not come out of the kingpin. Now, with the motor mount secured to the auger, we can look at our shafts here and see that they are lining up, so we do not need to move the motor back or side to side this way. We're going to tighten the motor down. Okay, and with the motor tightened down, you can see how it should look. All of the hardware is stacked properly. The lock washers are depressed and everything is snugged down. The motor is also sitting squarely on the base. It's not cocked slightly askew. This will cause belt wear and cause the belt to break down prematurely if it's improperly aligned. We want to make sure that the motor is as straight as possible in regards to the 2 pulleys. Now we can see that the input shaft on the auger is a little rusty. These can corrode after being stored in a humid warehouse for a time. Before we install the pulleys on both of these shafts, we need to make sure that they are clean and free of any burrs or debris that would cause the pulley to not slide on easily. What I'm doing is using a piece of emery cloth. It's 120 grit, a piece of sandpaper, a wire brush, anything can be used really. Just want to take your time to get the keyways clean and the shaft surface clean. And then when you assemble this, you want to oil up the shafts as well. We're going to use never seize in case they ever need to be removed. It'll make removal of them easier. And what I'm using is anti-seize lubricant. It's made by Loctite. I also call it never seize. Just put a liberal amount onto the shaft. Okay, we are going to install the pulleys onto the auger. This large one goes onto this bottom shaft here. This small one goes to the motor shaft. We've already pre-cleaned and sanded the shafts to make sure that they do not have any burrs or anything that will cause these pulleys not to slide on easily. Anytime you're installing a pulley onto a shaft, it should go in place easily with maybe just a few light taps with a hammer. We want to put the pulleys onto the shaft this way with the shoulder facing the bearing on the auger. Slide that in place here. Goes on very easily. We line up our keyway and we take our key. We've already cleaned this off and tapered the ends to make sure that it slides down the keyway easily. Just line it up, push it in there. Then we tighten the set screws down. They're on the back side. This is a 5/32 standard Allen wrench. We want to make sure that our set screws are nice and tight. Once we get them snug, we can take a pair of pliers, grab on to the end of the Allen wrench, and cinch them down the rest of the way. We want these to be tight so they do not come loose while in use. Now we can take our motor pulley here. Now it takes a set screw that is found in the second hardware bag. It is an 1/8 inch standard Allen screw or set screw. Looking down into the grooves of the pulleys, you can see that there. They are lined up. One is not too far this way or that way. This will make sure that the belt runs nice and straight and doesn't cause any premature wear or twisting of the belt. Now we take our 1/8 inch Allen wrench, tighten that down, ensure that it won't move, and then we install our drive belt. And you have to be careful when you're doing this. You don't want to get your fingers inside of this groove here. It's a good pinch point. We want to make sure that our fingers are on the outside of the pulley. And it'll just pop into place like that. Now you can see that the belt looks pretty loose on there. We do want there to be some curving outward on each side of the small pulley, but that is too much. That will slip. So what we need to do now is tighten up the belt tension bolt right up under here. Takes a 3/4 inch wrench. Alright, and now we can look down the belt here. Nothing is out of alignment. The motor is nice and straight on the motor mount. This is how it should look when it is installed and put together properly. We've got the belt tension set. What we need to do now is take our 3/4 inch wrench and tighten down this jam nut in here. It's nice and snug. There's no chance of it coming loose while in use. Alright, now we are going to install the safety shield. It takes 2 nuts and 1 flat washer. These are found in the second hardware bag. You run 1 nut down on this bolt here. It sticks out between the 2 pulleys. We tighten this down all the way. Then we put on the flat washer. And we slide the safety shield in place. Then we put the nut onto the outside. Okay, and with everything in place, we look down inside of the guard and make sure that the belt is not going to rub the edge of the guard. Everything is nice and clear, and there is space on all sides of the belt and pulleys. Then we take an 11/16 wrench and we tighten everything down. Want to make sure that we get this nice and snug, and now that will not come off. Okay, now with the motor installed onto the head of the auger and every component is in place, the head of the auger is now as heavy as it's going to get. So what we need to do now is move this set of clamps up on the tube to the right position so we can balance the auger. Okay, to balance the auger you need two people. We have a man here to hold on to the motor and keep the auger from rolling or twisting one way or the other. This can happen if you loosen the clamps at the bottom over there. So we have our man in place to hold on to the motor. We're going to come down here and loosen these clamps up. Okay, these clamps are held in place by 9/16 nuts. Just loosen them up. So we've loosened our clamps. Now we can take the winch here and crank it. And as I crank it, this set of clamps will move forward. May have to jiggle it around a little bit. Okay. And from this point up here, this is the bottom edge of the tube. You can see where my finger is here. We're going to put the tooth or the finger of our measuring tape. Then we take our measuring tape, hook it to the end of the tube right there. We bring it down and we can see that the back side of this clamp right here is at the 54-inch mark. If you move the clamps up on the tube to this point, your auger should be balanced. It may require a little tweaking and moving back and forth to get it right. Okay, now we're going to tighten the clamps back down because we have them in the proper place on the tube. We take our 9/16 socket on an impact and run these bolts up. We want to try to get them tightened down as equally as possible. We want to make sure that we get these nice and tight because this is what keeps the auger tube from rolling one way or the other. And now the auger is balanced. Alright, with the auger balanced, we can now proceed to wire the unit up. Okay, we've got the cover removed. Do not lose this screw. I put it back in the hole there to keep track of it. Now we need to install this box clamp. This is a 3/8 box clamp. It should come in the first parts bag. Okay, now with the box clamp in place and secured tightly, we don't want that to loosen up. We can now route the power cable in. I took a razor blade and scored around the outside of the jacket and then removed it. Now I'm going to strip all of the wires here. Alright, I've got all of the insulation removed from the 4 wires. When you're done, it should look like this. Now we can route this up and into the electrical box of the motor. And now it is pulled up and through the box clamp and is into the junction box of the motor. Now we want to tighten down the box clamp so the cord or the cable doesn't get pulled out over time. Okay, we've got our power cables up and in the box. Now we need to read the motor tag. On every motor there usually is a tag with a wire diagram. We are setting this up for low volts. That's 208, 230 volts, 3-phase. All we have to do is follow this tag's directions here. We insulate T4, T5, and T6. T7, T1 go to one of the wires that's coming into the box. T8 and T2 go to another wire that is coming into the box. T9 and T3 will go to the third wire that is coming into the box. You can see here in the electrical box, I took the green wire, that is always the ground when you're dealing with electrical wires, and connected that to this screw here. I bent it into a hook, loosened this screw, wrapped it around going clockwise, so when you tighten it down it pulls the wire around the head of the screw. And now that is grounded, I can proceed with hooking up these 3 wires. Okay, we've gotten everything wired up. We've followed the instructions on the motor tag. Now what we need to do is make sure that our wire nuts are on securely. It's easier to do with 2 hands, but you grab them here and then give each wire nut a slight pull to make sure it does not come off of the wire. Now when you are closing up one of these boxes, you want to twist everything into a nice coil so there is no binding on the inside. And after the wires are coiled up and everything is packed away nicely and the cover is reinstalled, it is time to wire up the variable speed drive. Okay, now we are going to install the VFD holder here. Just spread it apart, slide it up over the tube. Then we'll get the hardware here. This is held in place by an 1.5" 5/16 in diameter bolt, a nylon lock nut, and 2 flat washers. We've got it about 4 inches behind the splice sleeve here. It's held in place by an 1.5" in length by 5/16 in diameter bolt. There are 2 flat washers and a nylon lock nut. You can see how they are supposed to be put on there. Okay, we are going to install the variable speed controller. When we're installing this, we want to be very careful not to drop it. These knobs and switches are very fragile. This is held in place by 2 1-inch in length by 1/4 inch in diameter bolts and 2 1/4 inch by 20 thread count nylon lock nuts. We put the first bolt into the top. This is the top of the unit. And then we slide that into the pre-drilled holes on the variable speed control frame. Then with the nut on the back side, we can let go and put the bottom bolt in. And then put the nylon lock nut on the back side. Now we take a ratchet wrench with a 7/16 socket on it and a 7/16 open-end wrench and tighten these down. And we want to be very careful not to over-tighten these, tightening down the last of the bolts here. And as I said before, these nylon lock nuts allow us to get it tight, but not so tight that we will break the cast aluminum that this speed control box is made out of. Alright, now it is time to wire up the variable speed controller. I've loosened up the screws that allows the door to just swing open. There's 4 screws on each corner. Now inside of here can look a little intimidating, but this is surprisingly very easy to wire up. What we're going to do is first put in the box clamps here and here. This is where the 110 cord will come up and in, and this is where the motor cable will come up and through and be fastened into the circuit board here. Okay, now this is the cable that we already wired into the motor. I've already removed the jacket and stripped all 4 wires. You can see they're bare now. What I'm going to do is feed it up and through that box clamp there and tighten it down. Okay, we got that done. You can see how it goes up and into that box clamp there, sticking up and through. Now the electronics inside of this box are sensitive, so when you are doing this, you want to be in a dry, clean place. You don't want there to be a lot of dust or moisture. What we're going to do now is install the power in cable. This is just your standard 110 plug that plugs into a wall outlet. Before we do that, we are going to remove some of the jacketing, say back to where my thumb is on the cable there. Right, we've got our cables routed and up into the box. They're clamped in. They will not slide out. The 110 power cord here is just your standard plug. Comes in here, and then the power out to your motor comes through here. This is where your motor is hooked up. These variable speed control drives are pretty easy and straightforward to hook up. However, if you have questions, feel free to contact an electrician, consult one, maybe have him come out and wire it up for you and do it the safe way. Anytime you're wiring something, it's important to hook up the ground first. I snipped the ground that connects the door to the main box here and then wire nutted them together. That grounds everything then. Okay, and on the 110 power cord in, just plugs into a wall outlet. I put the black line on point L1. This is where the AC line goes. And then I put the white line on point L2. It's important to get these snug, but do not over tighten them. You will strip them and damage the circuit board. Now we're going to hook up the motor that drives the auger. When you are working with braided wire and wiring anything in, especially with circuit board applications, you want to twist together the braided wire and make it as clean as possible so there are no frays. Frays can cause shorts and it could destroy the entire circuit board. Okay, and now we can see that the motor is hooked up. I put the red line on point U, the black line on point V, you can see the V there, and the white line on point W. You can see that it says motor, so this is power going to the motor, and then over here this is power coming in. We have them all tightened down properly, but not over tight. They, however, will not come out if you tug on them, so that is perfect. Now what we're going to do is install the reverse switch. Okay, we can see the reverse switch here has a nice tool that will help when tightening everything down. Also has this wiring diagram with instructions. This will help you have an easier go of installing this. It's very simple and easy to install. On the front of the box there is a rubber plug here. It says stop, forward and reverse. This is where the forward and reverse switch will go. Okay, we put the forward and reverse switch into the box. Just slides through. You have to line up this little keyway or channel way here with that tooth. Now we're ready to put on the waterproof switch boot. Okay, we got the switch installed. Everything is in there nice and tight. What we need to do now is remove this jumper from the FWD and COM terminals here. You can see them right there. Okay, and then from our switch we have some color-coded wires here. There is red and white, green and white, yellow and white. They even include some zip ties to dress and clean everything up, route your cables nicely. The instructions are easy to follow. To the FWD terminal we have white and yellow going in there. You can see it there. To the COM terminal we have white and green going in there. You can see it right there. And then to the REV terminal we have white and red connecting to the circuit board there. Okay, we have our reverse switch all hooked up properly. The red and white goes to the REV terminal. The green and white go to the COM terminal. And the yellow and white go to the FWD terminal. You can see them there. Now, in order to run this unit on 110 volts, we need to switch it from the 230 volts to the 115 volts. That is easily done by pulling out on this jumper here and moving it to the 115 side. You can see it hooked up properly right there. And now, because our motor is a 3/4 horsepower and not a 1 horsepower, you can see the letters there. We need to move that jumper down to the 3/4 position. Okay, our box is wired up correctly and we are ready for a test run. To go over the wiring of this box again, we have our 110 plug, that is our power in. The ground is connected over here. This is what I do. There are also grounding points at each corner right here. Then I connect the white wire to the L2 position there. And then I connect the black wire to the L1 position there. That is where the 110 volts power in goes. Then coming out of the circuit board, I have the white wire connected to the W point right there on the circuit board. The black wire connected to the V point right there on the circuit board. And the red wire connected to the U point right there on the circuit board. Then I've switched the jumper here to the 115 volts side. This is where your 110 volts goes in. And then I have switched it from the 1 horsepower point to the 3/4 horsepower point. And then because this unit is going out with a reverse switch, we've installed the reverse switch. It's very easy to install. There's instructions that talk about wiring it in. We've removed the jumper that was on the FWD points and the COM points, and we have installed the yellow and white wire to the FWD point. We've installed the green and white wire to the COM point, and the red and white wire to the REV point. Now that we've reviewed all of that and everything is connected properly and set up properly, we can close up the box. Okay, and with the box sealed up, you can see that I've tightened all 4 screws. It's important that we get these nice and tight, and we get that gasket right there in between the 2 pieces sealed nicely. This will ensure that no water gets in there. Now we can start the unit and test run it and make sure everything performs properly. Before you start using this unit, we want to make sure and double check every set screw and take a look at every bolt to make sure that we didn't miss one when putting this unit together. It is imperative that all bolts are tight and everything is nice and snug. This unit experiences a lot of vibration, and we do not want anything to come loose while in use. Alright, we've checked everything over, and we will thoroughly test run this unit. You can see it start. Runs nice and smooth. Everything is working as it should. Now, of course, when this unit is moving product up and through it, it will be a lot quieter. All augers are pretty loud when they're running empty. We can turn the knob. That's full tilt there. Everything works like it should. Okay, we have ran the unit. Everything appears to be working. We will test the reverse feature. Flip it into the reverse position with the motor off. And we start it. And of course it won't run because it's slowed all the way down. Now when we run this in reverse, we do not want to speed it up to full tilt. There's no need for that. We only want to turn it up to about the 30 point. This will pull any excess product that's left in the tube back out to the discharge, and then you can vac it away. Okay, everything appears to be working right. We'll shut the unit off. Alright, now that we've thoroughly tested and know that the variable speed control box is hooked up and wired properly, and we know that the motor is working properly, we're going to test the winch out. Make sure it functions right. Very simple and straightforward. We have it in retract mode. That is with the clutch right here pushed upward. That is to let the cable out. This right here engages the winch. You can hear it ratcheting there. As we crank it, that arm should move up. Right here to this point, this column right here is straight up and down. That is the maximum height on this auger. Okay, it does not go any higher than that. Do not over-crank your winch and get this column to go back any further. Now when these are fully extended, they are top heavy and easy to tip over. Now to let the auger down, we grab the handle here and pull it over just a little bit, and we flip the clutch over and we let the cable out slowly. You do not want to let go of this handle or the winch will run away on you. Serious injury can occur. You have to be careful. You have to be smart. Do not let go of this handle. Let it out slowly. The auger is all the way down now. And there you have it. After you've followed all of the instructions in this video, your Javelin auger should look like this. We are going to talk about this unit's dangers and the safe operation of this unit. The buyer assumes all liability and responsibility for the safe operation of this unit. Do not attempt to operate this unit without this bottom safety cage installed. Before use, ensure that it is installed properly. Do not attempt to operate this unit without this head belt safety shield installed. Serious injury or death can occur. Because of the height of these units, they are very top heavy and can tip over easily. Do not attempt to move it around with it being raised to its highest point. Do not attempt to move this unit around your facility without it being lowered to its lowest point. Before moving the unit around your facility, back it away from the bin that you are discharging into and lower it to its lowest point. This unit is only to be used on a flat or level surface. When operating this unit, be safe and keep your hands, fingers, and feet away from the intake of this unit and discharge of this unit or any moving component on this auger. Failure to operate this auger properly or follow these safety instructions can result in serious injury or death.